Welcome to BharatLens, and today's video is different from every other video we have made on this channel. Every other video we have made has been about events happening somewhere else in the world. Ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Assassinations in Pakistan. Trump's press conferences in Washington. Sanctions battles between America and China. Today's video is about your kitchen. Your LPG cylinder that costs 1,300 rupees more than it did 2 months ago. Your petrol pump where queues stretched for hours in March. Your grocery bill that has climbed every single week since February. Your job, if you work in manufacturing, logistics, or any industry that runs on fuel. Your savings, if any of them are in the stock market, which has lost trillions in the last 2 months. A war that started 3,000 kilometers away from India, between America and Iran, over a narrow strip of water called the Strait of Hormuz, has traveled silently and ruthlessly into every Indian home. And today we are going to tell you exactly how it happened, exactly what the numbers look like right now, and exactly how much worse it could get. Because this is not a geopolitics story anymore. This is your story. Let us start with the numbers. Because the scale of what has happened to the global energy market in the last 60 days is genuinely historic. Before the war began on February 28, Brent crude oil was trading at approximately $73 per barrel. By late April and early May 2026, it had surged above $126 per barrel, a 72.6% price increase compressed into approximately 60 days. To put that in context, the International Energy Agency has characterized this as the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Larger than the 1973 Arab oil embargo. Larger than the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Larger than the Gulf War. The single biggest oil shock in recorded history, and it is happening right now. The Strait of Hormuz carries approximately 20% of the world's oil supply. The closure of this strait triggered fuel shortages across countries that imported most of their fuel from the Persian Gulf region. And India, which imports over 85% of its oil, with a massive portion of that coming through Hormuz, sits directly in the eye of this storm. India is the fourth largest country in the world by oil refining capacity. But refining capacity means nothing if the crude oil cannot reach your refineries. Indian refiners scrambled to buy petroleum from Russia as the war disrupted Middle East supplies. To protect domestic availability, the government raised export duties sharply on diesel and aviation fuel. The government is doing what it can. But the scale of the problem is bigger than any government can fully absorb. Let us start with the fuel that hits every Indian household the hardest, LPG. LPG is the main cooking fuel for Indian households and restaurants. 60% of India's LPG demand is fulfilled by imports, most of which pass through the Hormuz Strait. It was the first fuel to be affected by the crisis, leading to long queues and delayed deliveries. Stratford, think about that number. 60%. More than half of the cooking fuel that keeps India's kitchens running comes from outside the country through a channel that is now blocked by a war. When Hormuz closed, India's LPG supply immediately tightened. 3 rounds of commercial LPG price increases totaling over 1,300 rupees per cylinder have already taken place. Commercial LPG goes first, restaurants, small businesses, dhabas. And where commercial prices go, household prices follow. In video, many people across India began using fuels like kerosene, coal, and wood as stopgap measures. In Mumbai, many restaurants shut down fully or partially in early March due to lack of cooking gas. In Gujarat, the gas shortage led to the ceramics industry shutting down entirely. Stratford for Mumbai restaurants. Gujarat ceramics. Migrant workers began returning home as industry slowed down due to fuel shortages. Stratford, these are not statistics. These are people. Restaurant owners who built their businesses over years, shuttered in weeks. Factory workers in Gujarat who traveled from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh for employment, sent home because their factory ran out of gas. This is the human cost of Hormuz. Now let us talk about petrol and diesel, where the situation is equally serious, but the government is currently absorbing the pain on your behalf. And that cannot last forever. Under recoveries on petrol have reached approximately 14 rupees per liter, and on diesel approximately 18 rupees per liter. This means the government-owned oil companies are selling fuel to you at 14 rupees to 18 rupees less than what it is actually costing them to procure and refine it. In video, they are doing this to protect you from the full shock of $126 oil. But this is not charity, this is a fiscal time bomb. Every liter sold below cost is a loss that accumulates on the balance sheets of public sector oil companies. Every day this continues, those losses grow. A calibrated retail petrol and diesel price hike of 4 rupees to 5 rupees per liter is now considered the most likely outcome. A 4 rupees to 5 rupees per liter hike is estimated to add approximately 0.2 to 0.4 percentage points to headline inflation. In video, and this is only the direct impact. Petrol prices affect everything that moves by road, which is almost everything in India. Vegetables, medicine, electronics, clothes, cement, steel. When transport costs rise, every price in the economy rises. The inflation from a petrol hike is not contained to the pump. It spreads across every product in every market in every city and village in India. The damage has not stayed at the fuel pump. It has spread through India's entire economic system. Foreign institutional investors have sold a net $12.14 billion worth of Indian shares since the war began. Over 400 stocks faced sharp declines. The longer the conflict persists, the deeper the negative impact on India's economic growth. $12 billion. Gone. Out of Indian markets. In less than 10 weeks. Major global financial institutions have downgraded their India growth forecasts. One major bank downgraded India's market-to-market weight, highlighting a deteriorating macro mix. Higher for longer energy prices led to a downgrade in GDP growth forecasts by 1.1 percentage points to 5.9%, alongside a 70 basis point increase in inflation expectations. The Nifty 50 target was cut from 29,300 to 25,900. Subscriber India was growing at 7.2%. Now the same institution says 5.9%. That 1.3 percentage point difference sounds small. It is not. If oil settles at $85 to $95 a barrel after the war, that could lead to incremental outflows of $40 to $50 billion, more than 1% of India's entire GDP. India's stock market has experienced massive sell-offs. Foreign investors have sold billions of Indian shares and hundreds of stocks face sharp declines. India's economic growth has been trimmed to between 5.9% and 6.5% against earlier estimates of nearly 7.2%. Medium, the burden of higher energy costs is split roughly 70% for consumers and 30% for corporates. Consumers face higher fuel bills and indirect price increases across goods and services. Companies pass on a significant portion of higher energy costs through pricing, while also absorbing some hit to their margins. Stepto 70% on you. 30% on companies. That is the honest breakdown of who is paying for this war. Where does this go from here? There are three scenarios, and every Indian needs to understand all three. Scenario 1, short war, quick resolution. Hormuz reopens within weeks. Oil falls back toward $85 to $90 per barrel. India's economy takes a hit, but recovers. GDP comes in around 6.2 to 6.5%. The LPG and petrol hike is painful but manageable. July crude futures already moderated toward $114 per barrel, suggesting markets are pricing in some expectation that the most acute phase may moderate. This is the best case. It is possible but not certain. In video scenario 2, prolonged war, Hormuz partially open. Oil stays between $100 and $115 for the rest of 2026. India's GDP falls to 5.9%. Retail petrol and diesel hikes happen, 4 rupees to 5 rupees per liter. Inflation rises meaningfully. The rupee stays under pressure. India is one of the most vulnerable countries to higher oil prices as its net oil imports amount to 3.5% of GDP. This is the current baseline scenario and it is uncomfortable. Scenario 3, Hormuz stays closed, war escalates. Oil at $130 to $150 per barrel through the end of the year. GDP falls below 5.5%. Retail fuel prices rise by 8 rupees to 12 rupees per liter. Inflation becomes a serious political crisis. The European Central Bank has warned that a prolonged conflict will likely trigger stagflation and push major economies into technical recession by end of 2026. India would not be immune. This is the nightmare scenario, and it cannot be ruled out. Here is the truth that every Indian watching this needs to sit with for a moment. We are not passive observers of this war. We are participants, not by choice, not by design, but by geography and economic reality. India imports 85% of its oil. More than half its cooking gas. And the channel through which almost all of that travels is currently a war zone. The government is doing what governments do, absorbing losses, switching suppliers, tapping reserves, racing to install piped gas connections. These are real efforts. But they are being tested against the largest energy shock in recorded history. The Iran war is no longer a regional conflict. It is a systemic shock to the global economic order. And India, as one of the world's fastest growing economies, is not only absorbing the impact of external shocks, but is also exporting geo-economic stress outward into the global system. Medium, what India needs now, urgently, immediately, without delay, is 3 things. A diplomatic push to reopen Hormuz through every channel available. An acceleration of its strategic petroleum reserves program so that the next Hormuz shock does not hit this hard. And a serious, honest national conversation about energy independence, because this will happen again. The war is 3,000 kilometers away. But its consequences are in your kitchen, at your petrol pump, in your salary, and on your plate. That is why geopolitics matters. Not because it is interesting, but because it is inescapable. Comment below, have you personally felt the impact of the Iran war in your daily life? Tell me what has changed for you, your petrol cost, your LPG bill, your grocery prices. I want to hear from real Indians who are living this.